Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing my monthly collab with Greg. Super excited to do this. Got to meet him in person at Strongsville last week, so it was super awesome to hang out with him. So tonight, to try to stay on topic, we actually spun a wheel, and since I'm not technically savvy enough to show that on the screen, I spun it off screen. And our topic for tonight is corners versus centering versus surface. And our goal is to stay on topic for as long as possible. We also have a special guest, so I think that'll help us stay on topic. So without further ado, we'll bring in Greg. Hey, Greg.
What's going on, brother?
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm not doing as well as I was when we were hanging out in Strongsville, but
Understandable.
I've got 19 days of school left, and
Nice.
then I'm on a 10-week vacation. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. So should we bring on our special guest?
Making him wait in the green room and making him sweat a little bit. It's got to be super nervous back there. If you think about it, he's coming on with two pretty heavy hitters.
This is big time for him.
Yeah, I mean he's hitting the big time. So
yeah, I think he can handle it.
We probably should just let him on now.
Okay, so without further ado, here's our special guest.
Boo! What do you say there, liver lips?
Hey guys.
Now I gotta say before we start the topic, let me go off topic for just a second. I gotta say, I know we're supposed to be talking about corners or something, but hanging out with you two guys in Strongsville, that was next level. That was phenomenal. I felt like I was in college. I had a dorm room upstairs, except it was much dirtier than the dorms,
Right.
But it was fantastic. I can't even wait. I can't wait until next year.
Me too. I agree with you. The dorms in college were definitely nicer than that hotel.
Yeah, they had more amenities.
For sure.
Like the elevators worked.
Yes.
In college, stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of funny because Mike and I stayed on the top floor, which this hotel, it's not like a normal hotel where it's like, hey, we're going to give you the top floor room. And that's a nice thing. This hotel, it's like, if you're a VIP, you get the bottom floor. So all the elevators, there's like 6 elevators, 5 of them were broken for like one day. So for Mike and I to get to the 6th floor, we had to take the one open elevator that only went to the 5th floor. So we had to take that up on the back side of the hotel and then walk across the entire 5th floor to the other side to take the staircase up to the 6th floor.
I felt lucky to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because there were people there that actually got stuck in the elevator.
Right.
Luckily, that didn't happen to us.
It was funny, but it was a great time there.
So now, should we get into why we're bringing Mr. Petty on? I mean, there's got to be a reason why we're bringing him into the fold, right?
Well, yes. You guys have such great chemistry together. I can't believe you'd want to screw it all up with your first show like this.
Well, when I was in Strongsville, you show up. Since the show's all about Strongsville and not about centering and corners and stuff. When you show up in Strongsville, you're like, am I really going to connect with anybody here, or is it going to be awkward and weird the whole time? And I felt like I was dropped out of a plane and I was immediately off and running with you guys. And I laughed more. I laughed. I was like the road runner falling out, coming down a cliff and just immediately running. And it was like, I felt like I laughed more with you guys in, I don't know, was it there 54 hours than I have in the last 2 years combined.
Likewise. It was a great time.
It was great because I think everybody was super cool, right? It was just nice to see everybody. It was nice to hang out with everybody. There wasn't any sort of like awkward adjustment required, right? You just jump right into it. And
you picked me up from the airport, which was great. And I came off the plane and I zigzagged through all the people there, wondering how I was going to make it through the crowd. There you were. And you were actually closing like a gazillion-dollar deal. As as I was coming off the plane there, I had nothing going the entire day. I blew off everybody. And yeah, we just connected right away till, and bonded over the guy that tried to steal your Cadillac right out of the gate.
So we were at Hertz. This was annoying. So we're at Hertz. We're walking up to the President's Circle area where you just kind of pick your own car.
And this guy ran past us. This? All you have to do is just get in the car. And
you just pick a car, get in and go, right? So this guy, we're walking up to the one Cadillac, and this guy runs past us, jumps in the Cadillac and takes it. It's like, oh, so then we pick something else. We got a Volvo.
The last
Cadillac. That's not Cadillac. We're leaving. The guy is the first car in line. There's a couple cars between us and him pulling out. And then they make everybody back up. And the Cadillac guy has to pull out. And he drives back the other way into the parking lot. So then when we finally leave, I asked the lady, what happened with the Cadillac guy? And she said, he's banned from renting from us and he can't have a car. I was like, oh, he stole our Cadillac.
And we couldn't get it.
And we couldn't get it. And he wasn't even allowed to rent. He's been blacklisted, which I don't know what it takes to get blacklisted from Hertz, but he must have done something pretty stupid.
Wow.
What a start. But
wow.
Anyway,
that was our kickoff. That was our kickoff to the weekend.
Yeah, I didn't rent a car, which worked out well for me, but I think I rode with you a few times, but
yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk today about where you said we're going to do corners versus centering versus surface.
Yep.
Mr. Petty, when we were in Strongsville, he picked up a card that was covered in ice cream. So surface is not high on his list, right?
It actually is. I just thought it was kind of a unique item. It was the Youngling Thai Cobb.
No, that was the Ruth, I thought.
Oh, well, the Ruth, that wasn't covered in ice cream. It just had ice cream spots everywhere.
Right.
Now,
it was literally covered.
Because I think those are the only two ice cream cards at the show that actually had ice cream on them.
That's the funny thing. They're hard to find. They're more rare with ice cream.
Yep.
Now, typically speaking, the Yinglings are a little bit easier to find than Harringtons, I believe. But
in general.
But when it comes to the Ruth, there are more Harringtons than there are Yinglings. And you were even saying that yours is the second highest, because yours is a 2, right? A 2 grade?
Correct. Yeah.
And there was only one higher in the Yinglings?
I think that might have just been on in the SGC.
Okay.
And if that's what I quoted it from the notes that I had made. I believe so. That particular, and I don't know about the PSA. I did notice that there was only about a third graded total versus the Harringtons.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like the Harringtons are actually there's a third more. I'm sorry, 2/3 more. So I think there's only like maybe 300 graded total, like total cards in that group. And the Younglings, Yin Yangs as I call them, have less.
So if you're
in the Cobb, and anyway.
So somebody's out there listening right now. What we're talking about is 1928. There were 3 ice cream companies that had essentially the same cards, but the backs are different. They were stamped with the information from their company, and it was Tharps, Harringtons, and Yinglings, and there was the Sweetums, right? But those, according to Blue Jacket Dave, Blue Jacket 66, he's pretty sure that that's a confectionery, not an ice cream company. So that's kind of debatable, but he did a video on that seemed pretty convincing.
That's true. But the guy from Memory Lane said that that came over to help close the deal for Ash told Mike that the pattern of his ice cream stains make his very rare.
They do.
And
patterns, and it was perfectly centered too.
It was
like this. If you looked at it like this, it was perfectly centered.
Exactly. Perfect diagonals. And then he also said that sweet cream one, there's only one Babe Ruth in existence.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it probably tells you a little bit about the story. I mean, the fact that the Yingling is more common, but the Ruth is less common, because the Ruth could be turned in any of the brands for an ice cream. And so it, depending on where they were distributed, which was largely around Pennsylvania for like the Yinglings, it kind of tells you a little bit about what was probably happening in that area, because a lot more of the Roots were probably turned in for a reason, because of the region in which they were distributed. They probably were, it was probably hit harder. So there, to be able to get the free ice cream at that time, I think probably tells a little bit about the story. Like you could probably get, an anthropologist or somebody to explain,
Yeah.
or, an economist or somebody to say what was happening in that region at that time. It definitely makes it interesting for sure. Do you have that card
Yeah,
in front of
no.
you? Is that what you were digging up, Mike?
I do, yeah.
Right, because that was during the Great Depression, and that would make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's probably not a ton of. I mean, there's less Ruth fans in Philly. They're probably more Phillies fans.
All right, so let me see what I got.
They wanted that Grover, Cleveland, Alexander instead.
Yeah, I really did not know a lot about these, and I've seen the Harringtons on sale for like they seem to be a lot better condition. The Harringtons that are available, like Fords, 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the ice cream, the cob, the one that's covered with the ice cream. And see how it was assigned a grade of a 1.
But it's
Rightfully so.
from a centering perspective, you got good centering. You've got
it's
an
pretty
interesting
decent. It's
surface.
decent centering, and the
Yeah, and then the
surface
corners.
you could. The
It's a
picture's not
100-year-old
bad.
card. The corners are
Exactly,
fine.
and so that's why I thought. And also, I mostly traded. It was at the end of the day with Ash, and I traded him a 52 Redmond Maze. And I threw him a few $100. I think it was $300. So whatever it's worth. I liked it. I thought it was
It's
a
a great
decent deal
pickup.
at the time. It's a good pickup for the end of the day. And then truth be told, I had my eye on that roof. I just didn't want to spend all the money on it right there because I had a budget that I was trying to stay in, plus the check. Don't travel with checks. That'll get
Now
you in trouble.
let me ask both you guys this question, since we're not really going to talk about corners and centering and stuff that much. Now, when you look at a card like that, like you had said, Mike, you had said you didn't really know that much about them, and myself, admittedly, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I didn't know a ton about the 1928 ice cream cards, but here I am. I picked one up for my collection. It's on the wall right next to me,
Yeah.
and now I've got that kind of stuff, and it does seem like the further time goes by, I'm buying more things that are a little bit for me off the beaten trail. Like, when I was collecting, it was like 50s and 60s Tops and Bowman. That was like, that was kind of it. And then it's like now, like Darren picks up this awesome caramel Walter Johnson card, but like 3 years ago,
beautiful.
would you have been interested in that Walter Johnson card, Darren, or is that just
no? So I think what happened at the show for me was I went there for, well, first the corner surface thing. Centering and surface are more important to me than corners. Just that's my thoughts on the topic. So now moving forward, no. So I went to the show with a specific card in mind, and it wasn't there, and it pissed me off because this was the biggest vintage show, and I was super excited to find
you
this
didn't
card.
buy a card the entire first day.
Yeah, and it made me so upset that card
neither
wasn't
did
there.
I, by the way.
I bought nothing.
You guys are amazing.
Right? I bought nothing that day until the YouTube party. I bought Don's 53 Tops Jackie Robinson. But then the next day I got to the show, and the same thing. I just walked around for probably 2 hours and didn't buy anything.
You broke your cherry with William Chappell when I was right there as well. I was busy dropping. I think I had bought another card from him there, and there was that beautiful Walter Johnson.
Yeah,
he had the horn. Did you buy the Hornsby and the Johnson from him, or
no?
just
I bought the Johnson from
Ash,
and then I bought the Hornsby from William Chappell. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was a good, really good deal. Orlando got his Johnson, then I think from Chapel.
Yeah. So that was the thing. I actually talked to a friend of ours at the show who told me, look, the only way you're going to end up buying something is he's like, you got to just go buy something, and then the floodgates will
And
open. So I did.
that's what happened when
And he
you
was right, and it worked
Friday
out
night.
perfectly.
Yeah, it
But
sure
now
did.
that I started buying those, and as we've talked about, I've got one card a month for 12 months, and
Yeah,
I got
you've got no more spots left. And that's the
He's
funny thing.
still,
That's what we got to
he,
talk about, the lists.
so I got
Because
2
yeah.
cards
you've
left
got
now.
two
So I'm
cards left.
10
You got
months
8
in,
months. You're 8 months left in the year.
and I've got 2 months of cards left. So now that being said, I think my going forward focus after I acquire those next 2 cards will be more of the caramel cards, the ice
Right.
cream
Were
cards.
those 2 cards weren't on your list, were they?
No, but I really like
Why did you
them.
buy them?
Yeah, I really enjoy those. Plus, they're
They're
cool
nice.
because of all the different backs and everything. It's kind of, to me, it's like the T206 where you could say, oh, I might want, and that's the thing that's nice about them. It's like, as with the T206 is, I could go with like a lesser player, but with a cooler back, or I could go with a better player with a more common back, trying to stay
Yeah.
in
Or you can
same
go with
budget.
a star player, like with the off center and caramel stains, like I do.
Exactly, like
Yeah.
caramel fingerprints from like the little kid that got
I've
that got it
the one I
initially.
bought. The one I bought from Chapel has caramel everywhere. I wonder if I got it.
So how did we get to this point, Darren? Like,
Well,
how did we get
how did
from
you get to this point, Darren?
buying? Yeah, no, seriously. How did you get from
From
Tops
12
and
on your list to
Bowman's?
buying cards that aren't on your list.
So how I got to this point was I made a list and I accelerated. I overachieved is the way I look at this on the list.
You overachieved.
I've
So
heard everything
so
now.
now I need to come up with a new plan for
A new list.
a new list.
Yeah.
And I did a video about 3 weeks ago about my top 101 vintage cards. And there were cards that I always thought were cool, and I didn't know a lot about the history of the card. I just liked the card. So when I researched the history of the card and the history of the card manufacturer, etc., I just started learning more about that, and it just became a lot more interesting to me. So I would say if I didn't make that video, I probably wouldn't have bought the Johnson or the speaker. So I'm glad that I made the video because it kind of expands my horizons a little bit and makes me better understand those and better appreciate them. So that's sort of why I'm moving in that direction. Plus, right now I feel like from a like just like a value perspective, a lot of the big cards from the big sets are just really expensive. And I
Yeah.
think there's some really interesting, obviously, anything from like the M1015 set of a Hall of Famer, that's going to be expensive. But there's a lot of those sets that still have really good players that are interesting cards that are very good looking cards that are still, I would say, fairly reasonable.
And very low pop.
Yes,
Pop,
they're
pop, like
rare.
where everybody likes. And
Yeah.
you're talking about these ice cream cards. Now, when you did your video on those, Greg, I had been looking at these Stark Garrett cards for quite some time. There was a couple of them offered, and I just sit there and watch them for about a month. I started reading up about them. This is about a month before you did your show on it, so that's kind of like really when I started showing interest in them
Yeah.
too. And I kept offering the guy every week. I'd offer him $100 more, and he kept sticking to his price that he says, this is what I bought him for. I'm not budging from that price. So finally I had given him like $100 less instead of just paying the guy. And they were, by the way, both of them, he had a 1.5 and a 2.5 Gehrig in the Tharps. And they were both way off center. And then when you had showed, then finally he didn't take my offer. And you showed Ash, you showed his cases and
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
and lo and behold, that Garrett card, the 1.5 was in that case, and he had it listed, for a few $100 more than the guy. So he must have bought it off Net 54, or the guy traded it at a show that I didn't know about, or whatnot. But and then when I went to the show, the first thing I asked Ash, because I said I'm going to buy that card from Ash, because I said it was just meant to be. When I went up to Ash, he said, I've already sold it. So that's when I started getting more interested in the other ice cream cards that he had there, specifically the Ruth, and the Cobb was an afterthought, really.
Plus, they had your the D304 bread Cobb. He had that one in the case all
He
by
had
itself.
three
It
of
was
them.
the whole case. It was all by itself.
Oh,
and you're
yeah,
like, oh, that's the one I want. And he
that,
said,
but
he said
that was
that's sold
probably a
already.
$50,000 card. You know that.
Yeah, I'm
Right?
sure it
I mean,
was.
I'm not in that stratosphere. I mean, I might have spent
That would have
that
been a
much
check.
on the weekend, but not on one card. I've got a bunch of ones.
Well, you had the check, so you could have.
I did have the check, but that's why I write a check. You have to have the money in the checking account.
Fair.
So if you're just listening and you didn't see the other video, what happened was Mike bought a bunch of cards over the weekend. He had kind of tapped out his cash reserves, but he had this old folded up check in his backpack, in his bag.
And he barely can find.
And he eventually found it. And he
Damn.
kind of was holding on to that. It was kind of the golden ticket. And most of the dealers will take a check. And Ash knows Mr. Petty. And so they ended up working out a deal where he wrote the check. So if you watched my video from Strongsville, the second one, you can see him on the case writing the check, and that's the story about the check. So there's a lot of inside jokes going on. So I have to every once in a while just kind of pan back and make sure everybody understands what's going on.
Well, the joke was also when I couldn't find the check that you didn't show on your. You should have showed that whole thing. That would have been hilarious.
I know.
Fumbling through all the shit I had. I had cards from Graig, midlife cards. I had Rocket Rick's signed card. I had Darren, all these cards everywhere, but I couldn't find my check. I finally said, well, shit, I must have lost it. I said, I'm going to have to PayPal him. And Darren looks at me. I start looking at my app. He goes, do you know how to do that? I go, no. I have no He takes my phone and starts hitting the buttons. And that's when I found the check, So, I mean, it's always something with me, especially spending that kind of money. I don't know if I'm just, my nerves get the best of me or what. But
so let me ask you guys this question then. Just I had a question that was asked to me for my Wednesday episode, and it was about if what other people are buying at a show like this, if it starts affecting what you start buying. The question was basically, so when you're around all these other collectors and these guys are buying all this stuff, do you think it starts to affect what you decide to buy? And I don't know if the question was specific to like price range or if it was specific to types of cards or players. But with that kind of broad question in mind, do you feel like there is some amount of, being affected by the others in the group and what's happening? Does it start to rub off on you in any way?
Yes, I think so. So I think for me, what they're buying isn't necessarily rubbing off on me. For the example of Strongsville, what actually rubbed off a lot on me was the Friday night after I bought nothing on Friday. At the YouTube event, Andrew Nuffsaid Cards had a box of cards with him that he brought from his house just to let people take a look at, and
they were incredible.
They were insane. And talking to him about them and learning more about them, and also talking to Dave Blue Jacket, who was standing there too. I had two of the most knowledgeable guys on these pre-war cards standing there.
It was fascinating.
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating talking about them. So I got a kind of deeper appreciation for them the night before. So I wouldn't say that what people were buying or what, how much they were spending or anything that kind of rubbed off on me. What rubbed off on me was the new knowledge I had and the new appreciation, understanding I had for some of those cards allowed me to go buy those. And then once I bought those and I was comfortable spending money again, I then went and bought cards for my list.
You did? Oh yeah, I get you did, because you did buy that great Jackie Robinson card.
Yeah, I picked up the Jackie.
That was a gorgeous, the 1950 Bowman, beautiful card. But that was just a, like you said, a byproduct of luck.
Yeah,
you just happened to you just saw it because you probably saw it before.
Yeah, I saw probably 24 of them, but that specific one had the centering was great.
Yeah.
The corners look like a card from 1950. But what I
Oh,
loved
very
about
good.
it was the registration. When you look at his face, it's
Yeah.
so perfectly clear.
Right.
The
Yeah, that
50
makes a big
Bowmans in football and in baseball had real bad registration issues. And when you see one that has it really crisp, it really pops. And that whole year is really kind of known for that. And so when you do see one, it's like it's just different and it just looks different. Um, do you think that what others were buying affected you at all, Mike? Is it
No,
or
no, I
no?
mean, I don't think so. No, because I have a list of, I had
He
a list
does. I saw it.
of 50. Of course, I shredded that list and started a new one. But I'm seriously considering like making a shorter list. Like, so
Mhm.
you're thinking about regenerating your list like I was. All I know is that's going to cost you a lot of money. I can tell you that. As if you are a little bit more focused, I think. I thought 50 would focus me, but it doesn't focus me enough, I think. But I also don't believe I'm being influenced by others. You know, I wanted that yellow Ruth. I had the yellow Ruth and the red Ruth on my list. I passed on Mike's cards that he sold to Ash for various reasons. I mean, they were expensive, and that would have taken up my entire budget pretty much if I bought those two and the Garrick. And then after looking at them, and also you know, going over it with Orlando, it just didn't really feel like they were right for me for that price point. I thought that maybe I might be able to get a 1 and a 1.5 or a 2. That's more in my wheelhouse, I think, than those cards. While they were gorgeous, they, you know, the registration on one of them was off a little bit. It had a significant crease through and through on the right hand side that was more visible. Even, you know, I ended up picking up a 1, not nearly the brightness in the yellow, let's say. And there's the similar crease, but the crease is right up his elbow to his arm, his forearm. So you don't see it like you do the other one. It's a little more hidden. And I saved about $4,000 on it. So I was able to buy, you know, a card like that. And
Right.
this is extremely low pop,
Mhm.
you know.
And that's an
I
American caramel, yeah?
This is an American Caramel E121 Thai Cobb, 1922. And there again, there's just not a lot of these.
Yeah.
So
But
if you're listening at home, it's a Cobb where he's holding the bat and it's from about just below his waist up, and it's a 1920s American caramel card.
Mhm.
and anyway, so that was my rationale in the thinking. And so like these cards, I've been trying to collect what I can of Cobb when I find a unique something with a lower pop. And this one happened to be centered. It's funny when he sold it to me, it had a scratch across it. You probably can't see it in the picture. I'm sure you can't. But the seller said, yeah, this particular one has a scratch across it. It's a printing plate error. And half of them have it, half of them don't. I said, shit, I never even saw the scratch until you pointed it out. You know, I needed to be
Yeah.
more careful.
What was funny about that though is you and I were just a touch suspect about that. So
Yeah.
when we went and grabbed a bite to eat, and we're like, yeah, I don't know. Then we went to the YouTube event, and you showed the card to Andrew, and when he looked at it, the
And
first thing he
Dave,
said was,
they were
"Oh, it has
sitting
the
next to each
printing
other.
plate the
Right.
printing plate line." We're like,
Yeah, Dave
okay,
goes,
that's
I'm
real.
not so sure about that. And then he
Yeah.
said, you know, it does. They do have that. Yeah. So that made me feel a little bit better about the purchase. And also William Sheppel. Obviously, he
Right.
wasn't trying to hide anything. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Well, I think
the
that was
best.
the big thing with the show for me too is I really liked being able to show the card I'm looking at buying to people that know that card better than I do for pretty much every
Boy,
one of the cards that I bought, and then they give feedback. There was a 34 Garrick yellow that I was looking at. It was in a 4. I wasn't comfortable with the grade. I thought it was a little overgraded.
I
So
told you about that seller.
yeah, and you
So he
told me
was a
about the
man.
seller, about the issues, and then Andrew was standing there talking to somebody. So I asked him if he wouldn't mind. So he walked over, he looked at it, he talked to the seller for a second, and then I caught back up with him, and he said, "Yeah, no, I agree with you. It looks more like a 2 or a 3." right?
If
And
this
then
was the benefit of this show, I mean,
yeah,
that cannot be understated. I mean, the fact that you had within arm's yelling distance to anybody,
yeah.
which I mean,
Well, I
that was
almost
the
spent
best thing of the whole show. The fact that you
100%. I
could do
almost spent
that.
my whole
That's why
budget on a Herpelsheimer clothing Ty Cobb because I'm like, oh
I
wow,
wish
that's
you should have.
it's super rare, right?
I saw it.
And
Yeah.
I was looking at it. When I was looking at it, Dave walked over and he's like, "Oh, that's an interesting card." And he talked about it for a little bit. And then when the lady, the lady at the dealer turned to look at someone else, he just said, "No," and then he walked off. So I was like, "I guess." So then I walked off.
Well, they had that card displayed with the back showing up front.
Yep.
They didn't even show the card.
Yeah.
You know, they just showed that they tried to sell it as a back.
Yep.
Well, I mean, unless they get some idiot in there that's going to buy centered backs like me, nobody's ever going to want to look at the back that bad.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that's funny because when I walked away, I asked him later, I said, I didn't buy it because you kind of were like, no, and walked off. But I'm curious why. And he said that whole set is rare, but the Herpelsheimer specifically is the second most common back, and a more reasonable price point would have been about 66% of what they were asking. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, had he not been there, I probably would have been like, cool, guys, I just bought this super awesome rare card. And then, I'd have a bunch of people that knew way more about the card than I did say, yeah, you did buy a cool rare card, but you paid way too much for it, right? So,
and that was the highlight of the show. The fact that you had that kind of knowledge between Orlando and you have you guys both have great eyes for cards. I mean, let's face it. I don't know how you do it with those bifocals of yours, Darren.
I know, right?
I mean, you look.
This.
I don't know if those are like X-ray vision or what. They're not like our. And I mean, the funny thing is here I'm a guy that needs the help sometimes. I even found myself helping Chris out on one of the cards he was looking at too. So we were really a great team out there. I mean, in numbers, it was just awesome to be a part of it.
Every single card I bought, I had somebody on my shoulder looking at the card with me, or I had multiple people look at the card before I bought it in case I potentially missed something, which is really pretty amazing. Now, Darren, let me ask you a different question, because the way I work is I want to try to take situations and learn from it for the future. And the frustration you had was you went into this show really hoping for one particular card. And you went through the whole room, you asked everyone, that particular card wasn't there, and you were flustered for sure. And with that experience behind you, having gone through that, now going into the national or going into Strongsville next year, how will you plan and strategize for a show a little bit differently so that you don't have that happen? Like, will you have 2 or 3 cards that you're going for, or will you rank them, or will you have a wider list? Like, what will you do differently so that you don't have that kind of 24-hour spin cycle that you were in for a minute?
Yeah, no, that was definitely frustrating. Like, and I felt bad because I felt like I wasn't myself. I felt like I was being a little like curmudgeon-y because I was frustrated by it. So that, that upset me. So what I think my plan will be for future shows, it's going to be more kind of like the Jackie Robinson, pick cards from my list that are obtainable fairly, they're not hard to find one, right? But go to the show and have like a list of 4 or 5 of them and try to find one that is just like absolutely beautiful eye appeal and buy that. And then for the cards that are really rare, one of the benefits of having all the YouTubers there and all these guys that have even some viewers of ours that have just really big collections, they were able to introduce me to the dealers, right? And for lack of a better way of saying it, kind of vouch for me. So I asked 2 or 3 of them to keep an eye out, and they have my contact info now. So
and they will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think for the rare stuff, for me, maybe my focus would be letting those guys look for it and try to find it for me, while at the same time
I think part
looking
of
at,
it too is that we expected everything to be there in your
yeah,
wildest
that was the
dreams.
problem, right?
It's your expectations. You really just have to kind of manage your expectations.
Which
And
is,
that's a hard thing to do when you have your mindset on something that you've never seen before. I think other collectors like Sammy had the same issue. You know, he was looking for certain specific things. He didn't find them. But what did he find instead? He found a gorgeous Willie Mays bazooka at Chappell's table, way over to the right-hand side, buried, you know, and probably the only one there. And a really nice, rare, beautiful maze piece. He
yeah,
pulled out of it.
and that was the thing. Like, and honestly, what made me realize I needed to just figure something out was when I was like, that card's not here. How can it not be here? This show's not what I expected. And then I walked by memory lane and I'm like, oh, look, there's a M101 5 Ruth rookie. There's a Fredericks photo Ruth and a 5.5, right? There's a Texas Tommy, Walter Johnson. I think it was Walter Johnson or Christy Matheson. But then I'm like, okay, look, I'm being an idiot because here are cards that I'll never be able to touch. So clearly this show has a lot of really cool stuff and I'm just being an a-hole. So I'm going to adjust.
I think it's just, you know, you get disappointed. You know, there's,
you know, I think I
you.
experienced, and I haven't talked really too much about this, but I think I had the opposite experience of you, Darren. I actually had 10 cards that I went as my goal cards. And I had said to myself, I want to come home with one of these 10 cards. And I comped them from about a grade below that I would consider to a grade above that I would consider. I comped every half grade, every sale over the last 6 months for all 10 cards. And when I went through the table the first night, there were some of those cards, but I wasn't seeing one that really was the one. It wasn't like this obvious thing. But what I was seeing were some other cards, like if I had made my list 20 instead of 10, that would have been on the list. Like I saw two.
See, that's why you got to have 50 on your list.
I saw two beautiful 48 Bowman Stand Mutuals that were, I mean, beautiful and really well priced. But I was like, nope, I can't touch those because they're not on my list of 10. I'm coming home. I'm going to stay focused on these 10. And so I went through the first night and I was like, okay, I don't think that I see anything that meets my list of what I'm looking for. So then at the end of the night, I went through and I go, well, let's look at those other cards that aren't on the list. And there were about 4 or 5. The two mutuals were just 2 of them, and they were gone. They had been sold. And I was like, dang it. So now I let the stuff that would have been the next tier, I let that get away because I was so focused on this tier. And then I ended up seeing a couple of cards that I hadn't seen.
I think
in fact,
it's just the ebb and the flow of the show and the way you're shopping, though, because you know, for that it leads you to another place, and then it's almost like taking one step at a time. Once you decide to make that, you know, that big move with your budget, whether it's 100 or whether it's 1,000 or 10,000. When you make that step, it leads you to other steps, and it also crosses out a whole lot of other things that you may not be able to buy. So you kind of just have to work your way through it, and then you know, and take it as it goes. I mean, I was really happy with what I brought home. I also noticed that I picked up a lot of ones, which is not usually where in my wheelhouse. It was just that I got a lot more rare items, I think, and willing to look at a card in a different light. Like I said, you know, with the ice cream card with the cob that I showed. I mean, it's not, I like it. You know, in
no,
fact,
it's beautiful.
I traded it for a double.
Yeah, it's a great card.
And then I never dreamed that I would get this particular Ruth card after already getting the Ruth yellow. But, you know, saving the money on those 2 cards that I didn't buy really helped. And then that Lou Gehrig that I got out of the Grail collection. And thank you to Mike and Chris and John for finding those cards and to allowing me to purchase that. That was you know, really sweet of them. And really, it's great. I just love that card.
That's a beautiful card as well.
So, Darren, are you going to go in and I know, Mike, you're not going to be at the National, allegedly.
I'm not.
But so, Darren, you're going to go into the National. How is your plan? Are you going to go in with 3 or 4 cards? You going to go in with 10 cards? You going to go in with 2 cards? What are you going to do?
I think it depends. I would guess I'll have my list completed before the National, maybe. So it would be a new list, but I don't know. I think
so your list
is going to be on the new list. Another 12,
probably.
Okay.
No, honestly, what I tried the list and I realized I don't like the list because it limits me. Because if I find something that I like the Walter Johnson caramel card,
well, I don't like my list. What I found out is it cost me a lot of effing money. That's
right.
what I found out. A list of 50.
Right. So now I think I might stop doing lists. I've realized the best fiscal decision is to not have a list.
I agree. We only started doing these lists at the beginning of the year when everybody suggests let's make a list.
Yeah, right. We made the list video and then I changed it twice.
Focusing has its positive times and negative times. When you're dealing with baseball cards, you don't need to focus.
I agree with you.
You need to go out. You need to conquer what you see, and when you find a nice card that fits your budget and it fits your eye, you need to buy it. So that's basically it.
I agree with you, and that's what I'm going to do at the National because I think if I was at a point in my collecting, like there are some collectors that really do have the very best of the best and the full gamut of that. For them, I think a list is good because then it's like, hey, here are some very specific cards that are hard to find that I want to just look out for. But for me,
if they're on your list, for me too, if they're on your list, I mean, shit, it gives you the license just to, it's on my list, I gotta get it.
Exactly.
And I never spent so much damn money in a year with making a list.
I agree with you. When I had last year, I bought way more cards than I have this year by this point in the year. I didn't have a list, so I would just find interesting cards and buy them. And I think my average price point per card was like a 6th or a 7th of what they are this year. So the list actually, I think, is throwing me off. And my collection is so small that there's so many awesome cards out there. I mean, I've got I probably have like 150 cool cards. I've got a lot of cards that I don't even really look at. I got about 150 cool cards, but there's thousands of really cool cards out there, right? So, I realize
you've also collected everything that I've wanted from the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Yeah, I kind of and then I knocked off the iconic
narrows
stuff
down your list, to what you can get, and when you want these players like Cobb, Ruth, Wagner, Gehrig, guys like this Walter Johnson, they're expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that I wouldn't say that I'm priced out per se, but I should be. I should price myself out. I need to.
So Darren, I mean, it seems crazy to me that I only met you really about a year ago. That seems crazy, and nobody had seen Petty before about 4 months ago. He had been commenting for a while, but
he was a Hall of Fame commenter before you guys even started.
There's no doubt. But about a year ago, you were kind of talking about how you were going 20 places at once, and your goal, and then by a few months later, you were saying, "Hey, what we got to do is I got to be more focused. I need to have not the shotgun approach, but the rifle approach. I need to be a lot more precise." And now what you're telling me after about 5 months of being precise is that the shotgun approach was the better method. Is that what you both are telling me right now?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so. My original focus about a year ago was to make sure I had an interesting, if preferably rookie, but if not rookie, an interesting card of my top 50 for my top 50 countdown. Because I wanted to be able to, I didn't want to get to a player and be like, well, here's, show like a, screenshot of what a card could look like of theirs. So I did want to collect those. So that I was focused and I did achieve that goal. But then when I got done with it, I'm like, oh, well, that worked because I did get all those cards. So now I'm going to do another list. But the new list is more of, let me just pick 12 cards, one card a month that I just think are cool cards.
I mean,
Actually, I
it's
take that
great in
back.
theory, and you really made a great job getting a base.
Yeah.
You really built a base, being that you've returned to collecting. And that's what I think I did. I built a nice base, lots
I
of
agree.
off centering, lots of nice cards mixed in as well. But for whatever it is, I built a base, and now you're kind of, taking it to the next level. So I just don't think, like, for me, I'm just pretty much done with the list. And I think I'll buy a little bit better, especially knowing you guys have great eyes for cards. So you know that you're not going to be buying a bunch of crap. Anyway, when you buy something, it'll be with a purpose. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing in my lane.
No, yeah, I think that's a good plan. So now I will have one card on my list until I get it, and that's the card that I didn't find in
Yeah.
Strongsville.
Well, obviously, you're going to be looking around for that. Could be a month. It could.
There went Petty.
he's
so
his
Mr.
modem's having issues.
Mr. Petty's modem just exploded from all of the heat going through the airways. Oh, he's back! He's back.
Oh, that was quick. I don't know what happened.
We were just saying that your modem exploded with all the heat that you were sending through with all those cards you've been showing us.
I wouldn't be surprised. It's almost 80 out here today, so it's hot. Surprised everything's working.
Yeah, it's low 70s here in Northern California. So
yeah.
So next year, Darren, you're saying the one card, and I don't think I think it's smart to just not necessarily talk about what that card is, but that one card, we'll just call it that card. So you have that card, will continue to be at the top of the list if and when it becomes available, that you're gonna go hard for that. But then after that, you're just kind of keeping an open mind for when you come across a really cool card, because that's part of the problem. I mean, when you're searching for cards that aren't super, common, they're not just falling out of trucks, because there's so many of them, that when you have the opportunity to get one, you kind of have to take the opportunity, because you go, well,
it's going to cost
that one,
you.
Yeah, and that one's not on the top of my list. If you say that one's not at the top of my list right now, that one's fourth on my list, so I need to wait until it's at the top of the list. You may not have an opportunity to get that card for another year or 2 or 3.
Right. So I think that's really the main focus, I think, is when there are cards that I have an interest in picking up that are rare, I'm going to reprioritize those over potentially bigger cards that are more.
What happens if it's off center when you finally find one, and one comes up and it's like, 2, it's got nice color and it's crooked? What are you going to do? Are you going to pay and you have to pay 2,000 over comps?
I'll buy it. I'll trim it so it looks nice and.
There you go. Okay. So
no, I think
you have Mangini's his card kit.
Exactly. I get his card kit and clean it up.
I got it right here.
I don't. I'll see.
Yeah.
So the set that specific card comes from, they're usually cut fairly clean. I haven't seen a ton of off-centered from that. Now there are a lot of them that have like bad edges, right? They're nicked along the edge, and potentially they could all have stains and stuff. So that obviously will drive it, but they're typically fairly well centered. So I still think though, like, there's bigger cards on my list, but they're more readily available. So I think that's really my strategy for next year. If I go to a show, and that might be what I do, I might not buy a lot of the real rare stuff off of the internet. I might just wait till I go to the 2 or 3 shows that have that kind of stuff there, and buy the older cards, the rare stuff there, so I could see it in person before.
And if the National is any indication, or if the Strongsville was any indication of what it might be at the National, that shopping experience there and having some extra eyes on things, I don't know if it's going to be as intimate, but you'll still be traveling with a group of people. for the most part. You know, a lot of people. I think you'll find it similar, and it, you know, you don't need as much help as some of the other guys, believe it or not. You know what the hell you're looking at.
I need help.
You're not afraid.
I need help with the really rare stuff, so I know what I'm doing. But I think I'm comfortable at this point with my gauge on eye appeal. I think.
Mhm.
And I think the eye appeal is a sliding scale depending on what it is. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
that Ruth card. I mean,
exactly.
I showed this to Darren. We
Mhm.
were together when I bought this, and I know you looked at it. We saw there was a little, issue with the top in here. There was there was a little tiny wrinkle going down it, which made it a 2, and I was still very happy with it, even though it had ice cream everywhere and off center.
Yeah, I think it's centered fairly well, but
it's not bad.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's the thing, right? There's a lot of everybody's talking about. I've seen a lot of videos recently about people talking about eye appeal versus grade, and at the end of the day, though, if you find a card that has good eye appeal for the grade in your price range, that's great. But you have to, when I hear people say, I'm in the market for a 2 that needs to have perfect registration, centered with sharp corners. Okay, cool. So what's wrong with it? The back has paper loss on it, because if other than that, you're not getting a card that's like that.
Or the front.
In
A
the
lot
2.
of these, like a lot of these Gaudi cards or the Ruths, a lot of them have just a little bit of paper loss on them on the bottom of the card. The backs are pretty nice.
Yeah.
The corners are what you would like. You don't want necessarily sharp corners on those. And I mean, and finding those centered, I mean, to try to find those centered, I don't know. I just think it's a waste of time. I think there's other things to look at. The cards are, the registrations on a lot of them are off just a little bit, like especially with the yellows that come out of the border, and those things are much more important than the
I agree,
because there's not a lot of border on them anyway. So it just really, and that's why I'm the low eye appeal king, and why none of mine are centered.
Well, and I was going to say, Greg actually got the Rogers Hornsby Gaudi, and he got, because he and I were looking at multiple on Friday when I was in my cranky mood of I'm not buying anything, so let me help other people buy. We looked at quite a few different ones of different grades. They range from what I think like 2s to 5s, with the 2 focus ones being a 3 and a 4. And at the end of the day, a well-centered 3 that has slightly softer corners on a 90-year-old card, to Greg and to myself as well, but I mean, he's the one who purchased it.
Yeah.
Had better eye appeal than a 4 that had a little bit brighter borders, but that was more off-centered.
Yeah, and your card was a little bit off-centered, though it wasn't perfectly centered, but the registration on it was gorgeous, and the card just like it spoke to you. I mean, you look at it and you go, "Damn, that's a nice card." Like those football cards you bought, Slinging Sammy Niedermeyer and the other guy, Otto.
Well, they were both Sammy Baugh.
Yeah, and that's to me that when I look at eye appeal, for me, it's as you get older, my flexibility with what is considered, like, if I'm looking at picking up like when I realized on the Showcase Showdown I did with Mike and Chris, one of my cards, my 1990 Topps Ryan, didn't count because it was a Tiffany. So I went and bought the non-Tiffany. So I had the correct card in my set. That it had to be perfect or else I wasn't going to buy it. Right.
Yeah.
But as I get older, not me older, but as the cards I look at get older, I think what's acceptable from an eye appeal perspective, to me, it slowly adjusts, right? Like I have a 33 Gaudi Ruth, also the yellow one. It's got a couple little wrinkles on it. It's got rounded corners, but it's very well centered. And for me, it's okay. Card's 90 years old. So does that the corners aren't sharp? Okay, cool. That means it was a card that had been touched, right? It wasn't a card that was just stored the whole time. Great. I'm okay with that, right? You get back to like T206s. I mean, my E92 Honus, or no, my E98, E95, the one where he's throwing. It's dirty. I mean, that card is a dirty. It's off centered. It has dirt on the front, but I really wanted that card. And when I bought it, I was like, look, it's over 100 years old. So
Yeah,
am
they're
I cool
hard to
with it?
find in
Fine.
general. And
Yeah.
if you get it for, and it has some eye appeal, otherwise you wouldn't have bought it for the price and the
Right.
grade. So
Right. For the
and
price
not
for the grade.
and
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
every card has to be a grand slam and centered dead on perfect, in every that's the idea, I guess, for a lot of collectors. For me, the cards weren't made that way out of a pack. If you have 10, 20% that are, great eye appeal, obviously you want them to have that, but centering, you should be happy. Like I see this morning, Greg's, have this thing on his channel with all about the eye appeal and when did that start being a thing? And it was always a thing. Ever since I was a kid, it was a thing. When I was 10, you'd always look, oh, it was off center or miscut, or maybe you didn't talk about it like we do now ad nauseum, but yeah, it was always semi-important, but it just wasn't the end all be all of every subject. But yet there are a lot of kids and a lot of people that just have 95% of their cards are beautiful like that. And like I've said before, more power to them. They found those, they've paid up for them, I'm just not in the habit of every time paying 5 prices for a 2.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do that. I don't want to get in the habit of it.
I'm with you on that. And I think that was an issue I had at Strongsville show. There were a few cards that before I bought the Jackie Robinson, there are a few other cards I was looking at that weren't on my list. So that would have been a dumb move. But regardless, I was still looking at them. And one of the things I noticed, some dealers, not all, but some dealers are actually, most dealers do upcharge for eye appeal a little bit.
Likely should, yeah.
But there were some that surprised me, right? I saw there was a couple cards I was looking at that I'm like, okay, I pull up eBay. Okay, here's the last, and it's not a super rare card where it's like, oh, it hasn't sold in a while. It's like, okay, 4 of them in this grade have sold in the last month. Okay, they're X price. VCP, I checked it, same thing. I looked at some auction results. Okay. And then I walked around the show and found a couple others in that grade that were more aligned with those other prices. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, this one's twice as much. And you ask, hey, do you have flexibility on this? No. Why?
And I'm not saying maybe for a key card or a card that you really want.
Yeah.
Go ahead, take the plunge.
Right.
But I'm not going to make a habit of it.
Yeah.
I never did from the beginning.
But that's
why I have.
Yeah. But when you buy, especially when you look at the older stuff, because the grade's going to be lower because those in high grades are more unobtainable. So you look at it and you're like, okay, this card's a 3 or a 4, but has good eye appeal on the front. So the dealer is asking what a 6 goes for. And you're like, yeah, but it has eye appeal of a 6. Like, yeah, but at the end of the day, if I find a 6, it'll look like this card or nicer, but it'll be a 6, right? So to me, paying up for eye appeal, and you see that a lot. I think the best examples of that are the 52 tops, right? You see a Mantle or a Jackie Robinson, those two specifically.
Yeah, grades don't even matter on those anymore. And who knows if the entire hobby, there is a shift.
Yeah.
So, it certainly could continue down on every single card. And it probably will, especially with the graders the way they are, that everything is so fickle. It's just a number. And buying the card, not the grade, is important as well. It's just that for me, there's a happy medium in the middle. I agree with you. Anyway, that's for whatever it's worth.
I want to throw this one thing out there too, because it's something that I felt for a while. I haven't done a video on it in a while. I probably should, but I think a card that's from the 33 Gaudy set or the T206 set that's sharp corners. I think it looks weird. Like, I don't think it looks right. It doesn't look normal. And to me, to have a soft rounding of the corners of long time wear tell part of the story of what it is.
It's the way they looked when we were kids. If you ever saw those sets, that's the way they were. In the shows that I was at in the 80s, and when I looked at every card I ever saw from that era, I never saw cards with those kind of corners.
Part of buying an antique card or a vintage card, for me, and I'm not speaking for how everyone else collects, but to me, it's the fact that it's old, the patina of the card tells part of the story of the age of the card, and it shows that the card was enjoyed. Now, one of the things I love, and I don't know if this is going to show up on the camera, but I'm going to show you that Hornsby we were just talking about. If you look,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Right at the top, right about here, there's a little mark. And you can kind of see it on the bottom, right about here.
Yeah, so
there's a little
you
mark.
go ahead and put that on your scanner at 10
and
times.
That's the rubber band marks.
You know, yeah. So
yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is it's the rubber band mark. And honestly, I love that about this card.
I do too.
I love that you can see the rubber band marks on this card. It adds the character to the card. Now, somebody else might, $20,000 for one in an 8.5 or something, and it's sharp. It has no wear. It has no air ever got to it. It got stored in tinfoil in a box under some grandma's bed, and it's a more precise example. But I love that character about this card, and this card. I didn't even put this card, this 49 leaf spawn on my list because I've never seen one. I've never seen one centered that was affordable. This card, the 49 leaves are always insanely off center. So I didn't even comp this card because I didn't think I would find one. And I literally was walking with Darren, and like out of the corner of my eye, I saw the orange of that card, and I'm like, "What?" And I went over and I go, "Can I see that?" And I'm like, "Darren, comp this for me." As I'm negotiating it, he's like looking up comps and whispering into my ear.
Story right there, Darren. I mean,
anything can fall in your lap, and I never, ever, ever thought I would find a perfectly centered spawn that would be anywhere near affordable for my price range.
And it just you paid for like what, about $350 or less for that, right?
No. Oh. This card goes for, in a 3. This card will go from 425 to 925, and I paid $625 for it.
Okay.
And what was great is the comp we used for it was dirty. It was off center.
The guy,
line.
Well,
piece of crap. That was a
piece of crap.
The negotiation.
But here's what happened: is the dealers kept calling it a piece of crap, and he kept saying it was not a bad card.
He was ready to just hold it in this case.
He was ready to hold it, but I just kept. There was one comp that was like 900. And then there was one comp that was 425. And every time he would talk about the 900, I would just go, but the 425, I'm offering 50% more than the same grade. Right. And it was like, as soon as he pulled up on his phone, well, here's one in the same grade for 425. I'm like, you just saved me $150 by doing that. Why did you just do that? And then I just absolutely just beat that drum until he finally said, okay.
You did. I mean, you really beat him hard. I mean, you guys, man, when you negotiate, it's a fight to the death. For $25, you weren't.
Oh yeah, dude. Hey,
like you said in the background, I was not leaving without that.
Oh
card,
no. As soon as that card hit my hands, it was never gonna leave my hands. If he would have said $850, honestly, if he would have said $850, I'd have paid $850 for it.
But you're a passionate negotiator. And like Theo, I watched him negotiate a card with a guy. I mean, literally just beat the life out of the guy for 15, 20 minutes over a card, which, I mean, and he won out in the end. And Chris was there to help him. He had bought a bunch of stuff for the guy. Says, and you're going to give my buddy here that card for $2.25 too, And he said, okay already.
Well, I was going to say, who was actually a tough negotiator was Ash's godson.
Yeah, that's why I don't negotiate with him.
We were 20 on my Jackie Robinson. We were $25 apart for like 5 minutes. I mean, and then we finally were like, "Fine, we'll split the difference." I actually lost out.
But here's the funny. Here's the funny part. I fought for 5 minutes for $25 on my spawn, but if I would been at the table with Darren for that Jackie, as gorgeous as that Jackie was, I would have peeled 25 out of my wallet and I would have just handed it to Darren and said, "Deal." I would have just thrown it on the table and says, "We'll take it," because to give Darren $25, I wouldn't blink an eye. But for myself, for $25, I would have kept fighting.
Made there with that.
Right.
I mean,
same thing for you. Like it's just I would have done the same thing. And it's and that's the thing. Once you get into the negotiation, it's not so much over the $25, right? It's where I'm coming from is reasonable.
You need a little movement there to make the deal, and
but it was fun because he had no expression. He's just like,
no,
he just kept repeating the same price. I'm like, no, it's too much. We're gonna hear. He's like, and just I was like, he's good
because he knew you wanted it, and it was just a matter of time.
All right, hey, we're at well over an hour.
We are.
So there's probably at least 4 people that are still watching or listening at this point.
Exactly.
And one of them's my dad. Yeah. And the other 3,
my brother.
So this was fun. Hey, now our first off-centered episode with a guest.
Off
topic.
What'd I say? Off-centered?
It's a good one because we have the off-centered king here tonight. So tonight it's off-centered.
You really picked it right. Yeah, you really
so we went off topic with Mr. Petty. If we were going to have a guest, it was an easy decision on who the first guest would be. This was
thank you guys. That's so nice of you. It has been just an honor to be on your show, and more of an honor to get to know you guys and count you as my friends.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was definitely awesome hanging out.
You guys are great. I can't wait till the next time.
Yeah, I know. I just wish it was in July.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna be at Darren's house in about 3 or 4 days. So
that's gonna be great, and hopefully you'll sink his battleship.
All right. Well, do you want to wrap this up, Darren?
Yeah. So thanks everybody for watching, and appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. If you are subscribed, I appreciate your subscription. So I'll talk to you guys later.
Hit the like button. Whatever that means. Peace, love, out.
Thanks, Mike.
All right,
see you guys.
Take care, guys.